All right. Hello, everyone. So, yeah, for these two, I did Canva. I love Canva, especially working at a high school and especially with my MI trainings. I just think Canva is a lot more fun, a lot cleaner. So, doing Canvas here. Couple things. I am downloading these as PowerPoints and then converting them to Google Slides as well, so you could access them whatever. Um, I combine these two together right now just to do one big presentation, but they'll be separated as you look at stuff. Um, so I apologize that it took a couple days, and then I'm actually recording this right now at 10 p.m. Um, if you know anything about BG, our cheerleading team's really good. They win state a lot, and they were in the conference championship. And the day before, they always do this luncheon where the cheerleaders get to invite teachers that have made an impact on their lives and have lunch. I was picked, went to that, so I wanted to go support the couple student athletes that picked me at the event, and then I obviously went late. And today, I had to come home. Daughter's like, "Okay, I have a play date neighbor across the street," so I was doing that and just a lot of moving and shaking. So we are here. Um, yeah, like I said, you'll get a lot of useful information from these slides. It'd be great if after you watch this, or even before you've watched this, if you took a look at the text and actually read that stuff too. But like I said, Doc and I, we understand and we appreciate how accommodating you've been, because the start of the term hasn't gone as smoothly as we'd hoped because of technical issues. No one's fault. Um, but we are looking to rectify it. And one way is to get us back on track of reading and these presenting these two in a flip lesson. So chapter 8 and 9 are really cool because it's probably, after you have an idea, I mean, maybe second to when you're trying to think about what group you want to run, it's probably the first things you think of. Like, okay, who's going to be in the group, and how am I going to run it? How's it going to get started? So I'm really glad I get to talk to you guys about this group, or these chapters. So you're going to see me looking off here. I have my, oops, just go blank. I have my Kindle here with my notes. So I just want to make sure I reference things. And I'm going to do my best. Number one, to just talk. This is one of those ones that's weird because there's no interaction. I'm just talking at you. So I'm going to try not to make it too long, but I do want to make sure I give this topic the just its due. And number two, I think the obvious is my experience with groups is from a school counseling lens. So I'm gonna, obviously, I feel like this book is probably more in a lot of things are probably more geared towards the clinical mental health side. So I'm hoping it naturally gives us that perspective, but I will make sure to try to address that as well. But yeah, let's get into it. So chapter 8 was all about selecting groups. And why is this important? There's a number of reasons. And again, I think my face is covering up is going to cover up some of these pages where you can find this info, but again, you'll have it in the presentation. So there's a quote that's not in here. It was actually the second sentence of chapter 8. It says, "Good, clients importantly or improperly, excuse me, it's late, improperly assigned to therapy group are unlikely to benefit from their therapy experience." And I would even maybe take it a step further, is that if they're improperly assigned for whatever the case may be, whether it's just the wrong group, the wrong type of group, maybe, as we go through, one of the type of people that maybe shouldn't be in group, it could probably have negative effects and then just leave a bad taste in their mouth moving forward for ever wanting to try group again. So that's why it's really important. It's, but the before group is maybe even more important than the actual group itself. And you'll see some reasons why. So just some things to point out. Begins with good client selection. I think that's pretty obvious. You could say that about anything, just about, right? Like, I relate everything to sports. A good team starts with having good players and selecting good players, right? Improperly, unlikely benefits. Kind of talked about that. Disintegrate. Contemporary research focuses on matching clients to groups, and always ask, what must I do to ensure the success of this group? And that kind of, in the school side, that makes me think of a quote. Paul Genovese, our post-secondary counselor, said to me, and I really use it a lot. Like I definitely use it every day to kind of drive my practice and my purpose is, am I acting with the student's best interest in mind? And I think about that with every decision I make. Some it's an easy, yep, there it is. Some I know it is, but am I showing that to the student? I mean, I think that kind of that ties along with that quote about groups. So, and just it's complicated. There's another text I quoted, I highlighted. It said, it is a more complex treatment that requires therapists to have specific training. Individual therapy may be preferable for clients who require active clinical management or when relationship issues are less important, and personal insight and depth understanding are particularly important. So, I think that's going to speak to this. We've highlighted a number of times, and we're going to continue to, how big the social aspect plays. Right. This week when we had class, we talked about how those can really show us things. They can be microcosms to like the big picture. But it's not to say, and it said the training, and that's why, every counselor ed program has a group counseling class, because, we'd be doing a disservice and probably some malfeasance if we just said, hey, no, you'll figure out group, just, get thrown to the fire and try to survive. But I like that statement because it's also, even though this is group and all we're talking about is group, it's saying like, hey, group's great, but it's, remember there's individual counseling in here, the different people. And so I think that's a great segue into what are the benefits of group? Producing specific benefits, right? And some of those are the social aspects. Some of those are kind of getting an insight to the client's world or students. Benefits that may be superior to individual therapy. We've talked a little bit about that. Social, right? That's probably the biggest piece. Substance abuse disorder is beneficial for that because, again, those clients can they will see others, right? And as we see, if something that's like Alcoholics Anonymous or something like that is like an open group, they will see someone that's kind of been in the system for a while and been seeing the benefits of group for a while, almost like a beacon or like a North Star or hey, this is where I can get. Coping skills, I've seen that firsthand. Not with medical issues, but with the grief group where, a student will bring up something coming up, like I said during class. Big ones are holidays and landmarks, and this is how I deal with it. This is how I cope with it, and let me try that. Let me see if that works. Reduces the shame and increases empowerment for women who are survivors of childhood sexual abuse. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Clients tend to do better when they engage in therapy they prefer, and that's one thing I always emphasize to my students. This is a choice, right? Whenever something is mandated, at least in the school world. Now, again, there are differences, right? Clinical mental health, there's money involved, right? There's court orders sometimes. And so things can be a little bit tricky, but at least in the school setting, and probably with a lot of your clients that, do have the power to make this choice, it's powerful to show like, listen, you choose this. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. And so that statement's pretty obvious, tend to do better. And it comes back to that, again, sorry, but here comes the MI Kool-Aid. That's a lot of what like MI is built on is, avoiding that writing reflex of me telling you what to do. Cause it's, it's more powerful. And there's this guy, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting his name now. I use it in every MI training because it's kind of something, it shows like what MI is built around. I forget. Oh, this is going to bug me. I forget his name, but it's kind of what Wikipedia is all built on. It's, for lack of a better term, the concept or the law or whatever you want to call it is people are more willing to tell you you're wrong than to answer a question. So that'd be like if I would come into this room and I'd be like, anyone see the sky? Anyone look up in the sky? Was it dark? Was it green? Was it blue? Was it cloudy? People are more probably going to lean more towards being more reluctant or quiet in that situation than if I came in and said, "Oh, did you guys see the sky? It was purple." No, it wasn't. It was gray. And I think that goes into one of the benefits of group is that when someone does something they prefer, something they choose, something they want to do, they're probably more likely going to get something out of it. Yeah. Deselection. So, yeah, I mean, let's look at these statements. Most clinicians deselect rather than select. Easier to specify exclusions than inclusions. Clients will fail if they can't participate in the primary task of the group. This is probably more important than accepting. And I want you to think about that for a second. And I'm obviously going to keep talking. I'm not going to sit here in silence because I want to be efficient with the time. But I mean, think about that makes sense that, it's number one, if we go back to that slide, it's the one they prefer. So they got to be vested in it. They got to be ready for it. They got to, we're going to see some traits of people that might not be the best. The other thing is you open it up to everyone, right? So obviously you're going to find the people that qualify, but what's the point of group? What's the primary task of that group? Like it said, what just in groups in general, right? Social plays a big aspect. Willingness to share, confidentiality, a lot of these things kind of play in. So that's why, as you were reading this text, you saw a lot of information about exclusion and deselecting. And, for some people it might be like, but wait, I'm a counselor. I'm a bleeding heart. I want to help everyone. I want to support everyone. I want to accept everyone. And that's true, but it's also knowing where to meet them and kind of, sometimes having to be their conscious, sometimes having to be that, whoa, let's think about this. So, think about that. Think about it as you're looking at some of the examples and some of the groups you're thinking about running. Like if someone meets the criteria, whether it be specific to the situation, to the diagnosis, to the gender, to the grade level, whatever the case may be that you've identified for your group, think about some reasons why, even if someone checks all those boxes, why you wouldn't want them in there, why you would probably recommend they don't participate, which leads us to poor heterogeneous group members. And I think a lot of this makes sense. Personally, I don't like the significant brain injury one because, I had one and I'm like, I'd be a great group member. I start getting defensive, but I got to take a breath. Poor attendance. I think that's pretty obvious. Like, how are you going to benefit group? By attending. And if you're not there, antisocial. Now you might be sitting there thinking, wait a minute, didn't Brian was saying that at his school he runs a social skills group, and that they offer a social skills group, and I'd have to imagine a lot of those students are antisocial. That's true, but that's more of a homogeneous group. That is a very specific set of people that are in there, right? Like if I'm running my grief group and I have someone that's antisocial, now that's not to say, maybe a session here or there, you might be a little introverted. And I said that word, weird, introverted. You might just be, the term I like to call is like, being a wallflower, just chilling in the cut and being like, I'm just gonna suck everything in today. I'm just gonna absorb everything and just kind of see how that sits with me. But eventually, like, to get something out of it, you gotta put something into it. You gotta be willing to share. No expectation or group value. it's think about anything. If you don't have an expectation, you're probably not the most motivated. If you don't value what you can get out of something, it's like take a lot with a lot of things. When I'm trying to wrap my head around concepts or think about something, I replace a new concept with something I'm familiar with. So, as you see back there, got the Peloton tread, got the Peloton bike, love running, love working out. So I kind of replace group with exercising. If I have no expectation out of why I exercise, and I don't see any value to it, I'm probably not going to get a lot of it. Probably not going to be motivated to participate in it. Right. So that's, I think, getting you to think about, hey, even though someone's qualified, why am I focusing? That qualifies the wrong word. Meets the criteria or is eligible. Maybe eligible is a better word. For group, then yeah, that's why I wouldn't want them in. And then there's a quote on page, what page is this? Come on, Kindle, help me out here, bro. Page 301, and it's there's a couple quotes I want to go over here. One says, talking about it's going over the traits, but then who maybe not to have, and it says, unsuitable clients are those who tend to construct an interpersonal role that is rigid and that would prove detrimental to themselves as well as the group. And then here's the part I highlighted. For such clients, the groups becomes a venue for recreating and reconfirming maladaptive behavior. So almost like you're in this group, here's why you don't like it, and I'm not really going to I might challenge you, but I'm going to kind of let you just hang out in there, do your thing, and that's just going to emphasize these patterns. And then there's at the top of the page, it says, so it was talking about if clients have no expectation, right? And then it says, these considerations are even more compelling for brief, time-limited groups, which are particularly unforgiving for poor client selection. And my head immediately went to schools. This book I've read a couple times, talking about like year-long groups and people traveling hours to get there and things like that. And that I hate to say it, that's not going to happen in schools, right? Schools are very time specific, right? We're usually, and we'll see more about this in the next chapter, 8-week groups, right? An hour. And depending on the school who runs them, like, I know, like in our school, like I said, I think I might be the only school counselor than our post-secondary counselor that runs a group. The rest are psych socials and speech pats, and a lot of those actually are there to serve IEP minutes. So that's where it's a more homogeneous group where the antisocial skills are okay. So I've definitely seen where I've had to talk to students after 3-4 sessions about, hey, like, I'm not sure this is right for you. I feel like you're not getting much out of it and you're not participating. And, I've had some students that are like, well, I'm still getting a feel for the group. And I'm like, yeah, and I know it's only been 4 sessions, but we're halfway done. So, and then it's that delicate balance of not being a threat, right? If someone's in and you're not saying I'm going to kick you out, but it's just, kind of keeping the I statements of, I'm just not sure this was a good choice. I'm sorry I'm sorry. So again, trying to avoid that, that's where it gets into this deselection and who would not be appropriate for your group. And then we got our antisocial group members, the antisocial social club, right? Poor candidates for interactional group therapy. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. May initially appear influential, but will eventually show the inability to relate. Often exploit other members, right? Just a poor attitude. just because of how they feel about group, how they feel about social settings. And then you could see homogeneous population may be the treatment of choice for antisocial clients, right? So being able to be people that they could see themselves as, they've walked in their shoes. Yeah, and then why do clients drop out? And on the bottom, I have a couple of college dropouts: Steven Spielberg, Brad Pitt, Mark Zuckerberg, Oprah Winfrey. Poor souls, right? If only they would have finished college, they could have maybe really been successful. Yeah, that's my tongue in cheek for the day. So why do people drop out? Why do people stop group? Premature termination is bad for the client and the group. I mean, yeah, it's leaving a bad taste in their mouth. For group members, I mean, think about it. It could raise a ton of not well concerns, I guess, but like questions that you are just making them feel uneasy. Like, was it something I did? Is it us? Are they going to still keep confidentiality? Is this the right group for me? Should I be dropping out? Right. So, obviously, it goes without saying that it's bad, and that's why, to reharp the issue, excuse me, if you could start by making sure you're doing the right process for selecting the right group members, hopefully you don't have to deal with this as much. Demoralize remaining group members, I talked about that, but it's common, right? I'd love to be able to sit here and be like, yeah, I didn't really get this part of the text because no one's ever stopped coming to my group. No, but I think I naturally am kind of prone to that because I tell students that are kind of 50-50, like, hey, give me 2 sessions, right? The first session is going to be very similar to an intake or just organization. Very similar to like our first class last week. It was more informative and you didn't really get too much of a feel of the class. So it's natural that, after that second week, I might have some students drop out, but I have had some halfway through, almost at the end, just like, no, I'm done. This isn't for me. So, and then, yeah, I have it here, 17 to 57%. And then I have highlighted, although this rate is no higher than the dropout rate of individual therapy, the phenomenon is more concerning to group therapists because of the deleterious, it's like, I'm trying to say, effects of dropouts on the rest of the group. So again, that's where, that is on page 304. That's the big thing, is that, I think of it of a tennis player, again, sports, sorry, a tennis player compared to a basketball team, a baseball team, a football team, right? If someone's playing singles and they don't practice or they quit, they're like, this isn't for me, it really just impacts them related to that sport. But if I'm expected to be a contributor to a team, baseball, football, soccer, volleyball, water polo, basketball, whatever the case may be, and then I stop and I just leave, like, that's going to have an impact on everyone else on the team. So that's why it's really important to try to get ahead of it, right? And then who drops out, right? I'm not going to read this list to you. You guys can read it, and it's in the text. But yeah, I think as you look at some of these, very similar to when you find a theory that you like, or we saw some benefits or group, it's like, yeah, of course, these people with a lot of these, not all, right? I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush and be like, oh, it's obvious someone from a low SES is going to drop out of group. And no, but like some of them, like, again, we had been talking about social skills, and we had talked about having being optimistic with group, and a lot of these are going to put you in a situation where it's neither of those for you. At least everyone's hands are a normal size with this group, right? So external factors and group deviancy. So external factors, clients too disturbed by external events may not be able to focus on the group. And then deviancy, members who do not fit into a group and obstruct the process are considered deviant. Deviant, that is a strong word. Going back to the group, and there's a quote on page 308. These conclusions suggest that all too often the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, right? So it is the people that want to be in group and get the most out of group do, and the characteristics that generally do not, don't. So going to the external factors, I did make a note for schools on page 3010. There's a part where under external factors, I highlighted kind of in the middle, the therapist should always inquire about any pending major life changes, such as a move and a client's capacity to commit to the group at a planned time. And then a little farther down it says, hence, clients should not be accepted into therapy if there is a considerable likelihood for forced termination within the next few months. So these clients are better candidates for short-term, problem-orientated groups. And that really made me think of schools. With those external factors, are they planning on moving? Are they do they understand that they're going to be missing class, and do they understand that whatever they miss in class, they're responsible for doing? If they're under 18, how's their family going to feel about it? Are they going to be okay with it? With schools, obviously you're in a school setting, so it's tough we're not a therapeutic setting. It's tough to remove what's going on in school from what's maybe happening, what they might bring to group. Is there something academic going on? Is there something with the club or athletics? Is there something with their social life in school? So you could definitely see how that could come into the schools or into group. And then with deviance, I have the term must be carefully defined. We use the word to describe a member who does not fit into a particular group in a substantive way that interferes with group tasks. 1/3 of dropouts deviated significantly from the rest of the group in areas crucial to their group participation. So, when we hear the word deviant, we probably don't have the best image of someone, but it's really just saying, that person that's just kind of not in the same flow or not with the same characteristics, or they deviate significantly from the rest of the group in areas crucial to their group participation, right? Some were silent, some were loud, some were angry, but all were isolates and were perceived by the therapist and by other members as obstructing. So those people that are just kind of messing with the ebbs and flows, right? Problems of intimacy. Conflicts related to intimacy can cause clients to drop out. Self-disclosure, uninhibited self-disclosure, unrealistic demands for instant intimacy. Challenge group therapist, though. Yeah. I think it's very, I compare this to when a student gets prescribed a new medication for mood or for focus or for anything related to the brain and emotions. I think we're used to, for lack of a better term, the Tylenol or the NyQuil effect, right? I take it and boom, I'm immediately seeing results, or at least starting to feel the results. These medicine with the brain can take 7 to 14 days to really start to show its benefits. And I think the same thing with group too is it's not come to group and there it is, everything's where you want it to be. No, it's being comfortable with the time it takes, and it's also the self-disclosure, right? But this, when it comes to self-disclosure, I think there's two types of people. There's the type of people who, like, if they go to a pool, they just run in and cannonball. They're like, here I am, open book, going to share everything. And then probably what you're seeing more in groups, especially with high school students or just students in general, is the toe dippers. The let me test it out and see what's going on. Um, so yeah, I mean, again, comes back to that social thing. How problems of intimacy can definitely be a concern. Fear of emotional contagion and other factors. Affected by hearing others' problems. Right. Earlier, yeah. Problems in orientation of therapy. Subgrouping. They're in group because the group needs a warm. Oh, yeah. That one is. I've seen that where it's feeling like, hey, you just need people to fill this group, and it, you know, them feel not feeling valued or feeling like, hey, you don't have to deal with me. You can just throw me in this group. From a school perspective, hey, I'm not doing this to pass the buck. It's just this is something you could benefit. Doesn't mean I'm not your counselor anymore. Doesn't mean we can't talk individually, but I think this would definitely help. Yeah, and then complications of concurrent individual and group therapy. I think it's tough for people that are so vulnerable emotionally or dealing with something to have an hour. Well, we'll just keep it at an hour. Have an hour where the focus is just about me. To now, okay, I got to share the focus with other people. And in some instances, I'm there to offer the support for other people. Uh, Hearing other people's problems, yeah, sometimes it's tough to hear what other people are going through for me, and I'm putting myself in the client's perspective, and it could just, if I'm in a group where I'm perceiving someone as hopeless and not seeing the progress they should, maybe I'm seeing myself in them. Is that going to be me? Is this a waste of my time? Groups are great. I know this whole chapter is supposed to be like, well, wait, this whole chapter is about why people shouldn't do groups mostly. What's going on here? But you could understand why it takes. Now we'll talk about inclusion, but it really takes certain people, and you really got to just be, perk the ears and really think about, hey, I don't know, maybe it's almost when you're meeting with people you think should be in a group, going in no, I was almost gonna say like going in expecting that they aren't going to be a fit, because then you're gonna have that negative kind of connotation, and that might impact you. But like, yeah, it's really important to make sure that the group's going to gel, because if they don't, then you got, if there's 8 group members, 8 individuals, and then at that point it's like, well, I might as well just do individual counseling with them. So inclusion, highly motivated for therapy. um I don't know why there's 29s in there. Sorry about that. Clients who do not work well in individual, work better in groups. Clients' attraction to the group and general popularity in the group predicted success. Right? So however the client is kind of just gelling in the group, it's definitely gonna have an impact on them. It's definitely going to really tell you how group's gonna go for them. Group composition. Yeah, focus on relationships in the interview to help predict. And that's, yeah, you're going to talk about the group, and you're going to talk about what it's there, but you're really going to be honing in on their social skills, how they're going to interact. Right? I think it makes me relate to, I've been fortunate enough that my district has trusted me to be in a couple interview panels for people. But like going in, yeah, we're asking all the questions depending on the role. If it's for a social worker and a psych, they have specific roles. I was on the interview panel for excuse me, our career and dual credit coordinator, who works with all the colleges that our students can earn dual credit from. And it was just interesting to be on that side. And it makes me think of this. this topic because while we were asking the general questions, making sure they're qualified, like each of them kind of had a theme. It was kind of like, all right, here's what we're interviewing for, but here's the area we really need support in. And so you could tell that either a lot of questions were geared towards that or that we were hypersensitive towards their answers related to that. I think about when we interviewed once, it was, this was at the start of right after COVID. It was after COVID, and it was all, the stuff was going on overseas, and our EL population was starting. It continues to, which is awesome. I love it because it's just, you meet so many interesting people. But we kind of realized like we weren't really staffed for that. So as that population was growing, we interviewed people, and there was 2 people who made it to the next round. One did not come dressed professionally, did not have a copy of their resume, did not have their references uploaded, did not have much uploaded on Applet, which is what schools use for applications, but they spoke another language, and we needed that specific language. And so they got called back in for a second interview. And that makes me think of, why am I bringing that up? That makes me think of, this second bullet where it's, I'm going to talk about grief group. I'm going to talk about the benefits. I'm going to talk about why it's good and blah, blah, blah. But I'm going to hone in on their answers. And I'm going to be really hypersensitive to, are they saying things that are going to conflict with other group members? How are their social skills? How receptive are they to this? Have they done group outside of class? Have they seen a grief counselor and maybe done grief groups outside of school? How has that gone? So I think that's why the interview can really, really tell you a lot, that pre-group selection. And then principles, again, interpersonal competence, psychologically minded clients, securely attached clients do well. Clients with high neuroticism require longer therapy. Yeah, I think I shared about this the other time where I had that one group member who I should have picked up on it. But again, I'm as guilty as anyone. It was a bleeding heart. They had been in the group before. And he kind of, as we were talking about it again, he's like, yeah, I'm not sure I need it, but I'll definitely, be able to guide some of the other students in there from my expertise. And I chuckled, but in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I should have probably had a talk with him, or maybe even recommended that he not do group, because he was a little narcissistic and thinking, hey, I've dealt with this for a while. My dad passed when I was young. I've been in this group for a minute. I got the answers, guys. Don't worry. So again, that is kind of picking up on those social cues that I didn't in the start. And then the difference between the 2 groups, right? So homogeneous groups are better suited or better for support and skill building. Composition's important, right? So like, even though, as we were talking about with the social skills and things like that, it's like, hey, the heterogeneous group is probably not a good fit for them. It's still important in the homogeneous groups. It's still important to make sure the group's going to flow. Groups do member if some members are advocates of constructive norms, support. Yeah. So that's something to look into and Doc talked about it a little bit this week, where don't just think about like, are you going to be psycho-ed? Are you going to be support? But like, what type of group members, and maybe explore why. Like, why do I feel like this could be a hetero group or this would be a homo group with the members? Again, just another layer to think about. And, I think this chapter really just shows, both of these chapters, and there was that statement at the start of this chapter that said, let's see if I can pull it up real quick. Probably not, because why would anything work quickly, right? Oh, I could get it. Chapter 8. That said, I think I said it might have been here where it's like, you have to be trained. It's group isn't just something that you could just jump into. Like, hey, you know what? I got a high caseload, or I got a lot of students or a lot of clients that have similar things they're working on. I'll just put them all in a group and just one fell swoop. No, there's a lot more to it than that. The next chapter is going to be about creating the groups, and boom, here we go. Look how happy they look, right? Look how happy they look to just be. I mean, look at old boy sweating our scarf in the back. Good for you. Normal sized hands. That's what I'm going to notice from now on, is how big are people's hands. So now we have done the before part, right? And the before part in many instances is possibly more important than once you're starting the group or once you're actually in the group. So hopefully that chapter really showed you why there's such an emphasis on that. So I took a couple notes on this first page that I want to read before we get started. So on the first page, second paragraph says, in addition to therapy group itself, we must also consider a second group. Oh, I talk about this. Yeah, that bottom one. Second group, the group of colleagues who will refer clients, the administrators who support the structure required for success, and the third-party payer, insurer, or managed care organization that may be paying for the treatment. Now, going from a school perspective, thinking about my second groups, colleagues who will refer the clients. So coming up here either tomorrow or maybe next week, I'm going to be sending out a Google form to my whole school. It's going to say something along the lines of, hey, you guys know I run Grief Group. I think I have a decent handle on most of the students, but obviously I don't know them all. You see them in class. You've built up rapport with them, yada, 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 yada. Can you let me know of any students that you know have had a parent pass that you think I should invite to this group? And every year there's always at least 1 or 2 or 5 or 7, or there's always students that I'm like, oh, I didn't know. So it's that. The administrators who support the structure required for success. So this would, in a school setting, come down to your department chair for at BG or in District 214 for student services. They are actually associate principals of student services. Excuse me. So it's working with him. In my school, to him. Why I'm running this group, what's expected of me for the group. If he wants to see plans or structure or topics, right? Just working with them. And then the payers, insurers, or managed care organization that may be paying for treatment. So I think this in the school setting, probably, they're not paying, but comes down to the student, and if they're under 18, their guardian, like getting permission. Them giving permission is essentially them on the outside world paying for it. It's, hey, this is the group. This is why your student would be a good fit. This is how it operates. Here's their responsibility. This is what confidentiality is. Da, 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 da. So, yeah, the second group is really, again, something that we don't think about, right? We started a group. Sometimes we just think about the topics and the type of group, and boom, let's go. Or again, and we're not thinking about that, who should be in the group, and more importantly, who shouldn't be in the group, and taking the time to comb through that. And then it's this second group. And then going a little bit down, the next paragraph says groups that meet under auspice, for example, may be affected by that organization's culture, level of stability, and attitudes towards psychotherapy. And I put a note that said groups, school. I have bad handwriting. Groups, school won't allow, right? So, like I said, we're not a therapeutic institution. We are a school. So there's definitely going to be, there's definitely going to be some topics or some themes or some things we can't run. There's going to be things you lose momentum on. Like, for example, I got trained in CBITS, I'll let you Google what CBITS is, but technically that can't be run by a school counselor. It has to be run by a psych or social, and we could co-facilitate it. And the first time around, I didn't co-facilitate it. Another counselor who's trained in it did. And we ran it for a semester, and then that was kind of it, because we're a school. And it was like, all right, we got to devote time to other stuff, which is unfortunate. So, yeah, I think this first part with the second group and then that second paragraph about that organization's cultural level of stability, things like that, I think you could kind of make a blanket term for that and just call it the red tape. What's some of the red tape that might get in the way of creating your group? A meeting place, in my department, this has been a big issue. Because as we are getting, every year we usually have 2 to 4 school counseling interns, and they share a desk, an office. And then over the past 2 years, we've added an additional psych and social worker. So we're just running out of space. We have this thing called CBO, College Bound Opportunities. They send a rep in. We have ALOP, which is for academic support through West 40. So as we're running a group, we actually had to take one of our conference rooms and split it in half, so with a hard wall, so that there's privacy and we could run multiple groups. Our department meetings, we have to run those in our college and career center. So securing a place can, and I was talking with today, I had to do a home visit to see how a student was doing with a social worker I work with, and we were somehow we got on the topic of like buildings and business buildings. I was talking about how my wife's company used to have, this nice spread, nice layout in Skokie that overlooked everything, and that they actually had some treadmill desks. And now they have a WeWorks account where it's like, hey, you just work from home, and if you need an office, like here's some buildings we have, for lack of a better term, timeshares in. And she was telling me about how, because she also has a private practice, how a lot of people are kind of leaving the brick and mortar private practice because everyone wants to go online. And if they do have a spot, they usually, now they're starting to split it with people so that the cost is down. And then, like, if there are people that want to come in or want to do an in-person group, because even groups are shifting to Zoom or Google Meets or things like that, which, I'll tell you one thing, ASCA is not a fan of it, because I went to a webinar when COVID, I mean, maybe they've changed their stance, but yeah, it's there's a whole telehealth section, I think, in the ACA or ICA Code of Ethics now, or best practices or something like that, because it's tough, right? Like, how do you ensure confidentiality? How do you ensure participation? So secure meeting place is big. The group's structure, right? Are you going to let new members in? Is it open or closed? How often are you going to meet? Talk about second group. And then, yeah, it's you need that support of that those stakeholders of that second group, because that's how your group's going to run, right? That's how you're going to find members, right? So setting the structure, privacy and freedom from distractions, space, form a circle. Yeah, I would agree with the circle. The seating, yeah, you don't want block views, but, like, I don't know. I think about my office. I think about those of you that are going in the school setting. We have this Danielson rubric that we evaluate on, and one of them is domain 4, which is like the physical setup of your office. And if you come in my office, oh my God, I've got a leather couch, I've got a mini NBA Jam machine, I've got a mini fridge, I've got snacks, I've got a wall of fame with just random photos. I have an extra monitor. I got, a hidden Nintendo hooked up. So it's like, I do that because I want to create a space that isn't too formal and is relaxed. Like, when I was reading this, and I can understand you don't want to block views, but, like, sometimes you don't have a choice. It's just how you arrange it in there. So, like, where I run my group, there's a big table because we're a school, and that's the only place I can run it. And then on the bottom, that statement, oh, one other thing it said, which I didn't put in there, was like, yeah, if you're having people observe, it says have them maybe sit outside the circle. Yeah, I mean, unless they're going to participate, but yeah, it's you want to create that cohesiveness, that family. Oh yeah, written consent. I would definitely say this, and also individual counseling in general. I know we're pretty fresh in the program, but you gotta start thinking towards your internship. You're gonna have to record a session, not necessarily a group session, but like an individual counseling session. So, I've not just at NLU, but I've heard horror stories of people getting at sites and being a semester in and then starting to talk about, oh, hey, so this is the student I think I'm gonna, again, school setting. But it's also been, when I had to supervise via Zoom to community mental health counselors, one of them ran into it. They're like halfway done with their internship. It's like, okay, so here's the student, my world, and the other one, the client that I'm thinking I'm going to record my session with. And that's when they're like, oh no, you can't do that here. You can't record clients. So this nugget just made me think of, hey, back of your head, just remember as you go to your site to interview for internships, make sure you know what their policy is about recording. So we got two types of groups, open versus closed. First, we're going to talk about closed. Accepts no new members after the first few sessions. Meet for a predetermined length of time. Most closed groups are brief therapy groups. So if you're running a closed group, it's really like, hey, let's get in, let's get started. You need to be here from the start, maybe a little wiggle room, second or third. Yeah, a closed group and it makes sense because especially those brief groups, if you're meeting 6 to 8 weeks, like that's only 2.5 months. So you don't have a lot of time, 1 hour, 6 times. Like you don't really have much time to build that group feel, that cohesiveness, that, their second family, for lack of a better term, possibly. So you can understand why closed groups are, why people unfortunately have to say sometimes, yeah, it's a little too late to join this group. Then on the flip side, thank you, we have our open groups. Replace members as they leave. So, I mean, essentially they are, you almost think of it as like college admissions when you have a school that has an early application deadline of November 1st, November 15th. Then you have other schools that are like, hey, like, whatever, we're rolling admissions. As you submit your application, we'll let you know if you're in or not. May continue indefinitely. So because you're not really too bound by that structure of 8 hard weeks, 6 hard weeks, this is when we start, this is when we end. It could be like binge watching something on Netflix. As you get done with one season, you immediately start the next one. So as you get done going through, one group, you keep going. And if it's not really structured too much by session, it's just keep going. Tolerate change in membership better with consistent leadership. So yeah, so I mean, it's even though it's an open group, it's not to say it's just like, the Wild West free for all. It's still that consistent, okay, I know who's going to lead the group, I know who's co-facilitating. So you do still need some of that structure. So the size. Yeah. Ideal is 7 to 8. For some people that sounds low, but I want you to think about why. I want you to think about some of those clients, students who would not make good group members. And what's it usually come down to? The social. If I've got a group running of 16 people, it's a little bit easier to hide in there and not share and not get anything out of the group than 7, 8, right? Now, sometimes you can go as low as 5 and up to 9. Some do 12 to 14. Groups with 4 or fewer often cease to operate as a group. Large groups may work in day hospital settings, right? Now, a lot of times in hospital settings, they can do that because many times that's not the only modality they're receiving support in. They might be getting support, individually. They might be seeing other specialists. Yeah, and then I'll be honest, I'm not going to touch the last two because I've never ran a group with 20, 30. Psychoed, that I could see why that could be a little bit bigger because essentially you're educating, for lack of a better term. It's almost like could feel like a teaching, right? Because you're trying to help them develop these specific skills. And then comes time. Most groups are once weekly. 60 minutes minimum is needed for a warm-up and working through themes. After 2 hours, the session reaches a point of diminishing returns. Now, I want you to compare this to our first 2 classes. First class, we talked. You got a break in the middle to kind of, okay, now I'm ready to go back again. Whereas last week, or this week, we went the whole time and then some. And it was Zoom. And some of you maybe, weren't the most attentive on the 100% of the call. So think about how much easier it was to for some of you, again, I'm not going to paint with a broad brush, but maybe how much easier it was for some of you to stay engaged in that first group or that first meeting where, yeah, technically we were in class together the same amount of time, but we had a break. It was a little more structured of, we're going to cover this, take a break, cover that. Whereas, and, even you guys, kudos to you. And we try to give you a heads up before, like, hey, we're going to fill up the whole time. But I'm sure it was tough at times. It was tough to keep that focus because naturally how our attention span is. Some therapists use time extended meetings, but these are not used widely. Yeah, I mean, in a school setting, you tend to go once a week. I have mine set up for an hour. I used to set it up by like periods, but now that we're on a block schedule, keeping kids in there for 80 to 90 minutes, I think would be a little too far. But there are those meetings where, it's an hour, and by the time everyone checks in or everyone has a chance to share their, I call them happy crappies, or just, process through something, I'm looking up, it's like, all right, well, we got 3 minutes. How'd today go? So, that's probably one of the toughest things with group is just time management, right? Keeping on pace, not letting someone dictate or take over the whole conversation or make it about them. We'll talk about those. So brief group therapy. This is just supposed to be a woman wearing a watch, but I couldn't find one. I couldn't clean this up enough, so she's got her heart rate stuff on there too. So brief. So third-party payers favor brief. I wonder why. Maybe because since there's multiple clients, they don't have to pay as much. Maybe because in the name it's shorter. That's a good motivating factor. Increase access to services can be a starting point sufficient. Yeah. So brief therapy, think about any intervention. It could be that's actually what our intervention is. It could be, we're trying this and seeing what it leads to, or it could be a starting point. 12 sessions, they're saying, is the shortest. A brief group is the shortest group lifespan. The shortest group lifespan that can achieve some specific goals. So brief. So common features. So it's, it makes me think of, again, sports. Over the summers, when you go to like summer tournaments, like you're not, you're not getting the same referees, right? You're not getting the same referees because they know, hey, after this game, there's another game, and we only have like a 5-minute, 10-minute buffer. So we need to be efficient. Now, I'm not trying to say brief therapy is similar to that, where it's not as good as a normal. No, it's not what I'm saying, but I'm just trying to relate to that concept of you have a set time, you have a set amount of weeks. Let's go. Let's get things moving and shaking. Focus on present and recent problems. And again, that's CBITS, that's for trauma. And I remember one of the criteria is a student had to had experienced a traumatic event. Doesn't have to be all the same type, but it had to be, I think it had to have happened within the last 3 months, right? Because it's present, it's recent. We're focusing on it now. We're not looking at chronic concerns. Real world, often homogeneous for a problem. Okay. Pre-group preparation is very important, right? Because, right, like if we're going to, let's say for simplicity, we're going to call my grief group a brief therapy group, which I guess you could. I really need to have a good know at the start of who are going to be the appropriate members for this, because we meet once, because my group's only 8 weeks long. That first session is like an intake or informative. That second session is really like our first group meeting, for lack of a better term. And after that, we're already 25% done with the group. So that's why you really got to be efficient and, do that pre-group and that second group and all that stuff beforehand to make sure you're ready for it. And leaders should act as a timekeeper. Yeah, goes without saying, right? And then, applying the group. So, hey, here's what we've practiced here. Like, let's use this in the real world. How's that going to look? Pre-group meetings, essential. Build a therapeutic alliance. Clarify the goals. Conceptual framework. Guidance for participating. Set ground rules about confidentiality. That is big, because a lot of times, at least in schools, for some of our students and some of our families, this is the first time they've really heard about confidentiality. Like, wait, so you're saying my student might say something to you, whether it be individually or whether it be in this group, and you're not going to tell me? Yeah, I'd say most of the stuff they tell me, I'm not going to tell you. Right? The only things I have to tell you are the big three: hurt themselves, someone else, someone trying to hurt you. We'll throw grades in there too, but it's you got to approach that delicately. And you just have to remember, in schools, you're the school's counselor. You're a school counselor. You're not a parent counselor. So yeah, definitely in that pre-group, you want to emphasize confidentiality, because for a lot of students, and a lot of parents or guardians, this is the first time they've really heard that in the school setting. And then why group, and what's the preparation, or why brief groups? Depression, grief, eating disorder, improves coping with medical issues. So very similar effectiveness between brief and long-term groups. Preparation improves attendance. Yeah, like, people are smart, especially kids. Kids are smart. And they can see through when you care or when you've just thrown something together to say you did it. So it's important to take that pre-group or that preparation, treat it very seriously. And preparation is a cornerstone of evidence-based group therapy. Yes, that makes sense. Preparation, prepare. Show your clients you care about them. Show your students you care about them. So that is it. 2 chapters, hour, 4 minutes, and 17 seconds. So my goal for all of you was, after hearing this, was to understand really how important the behind the scenes stuff is, and how we really don't want to take that for granted. and how it can kind of work into your everyday counseling life. I use it. I bring this up when I teach career counseling because it's a funny story. Because long story, not super long, but not short. For my doc program, I had to do. You'll see where I'm going with this. I had to do. We had to present on a theory, and I decided to do the career development theories because I was like, listen, I work in a school district that's huge on career pathways. This will be fine, and I did it. I got an A, not to brag. But my professor, Dr. Saprina, who's in the counselor program in Tampa, he told me, he's like, if you can teach career development counseling, you'll never be without a job in higher ed because people don't really want to teach it. And why? Because it's not what they generally think of counseling. I'm sure, I'm not going to paint with a broad brush to say all of you, but I'm sure a lot of you, if I asked you why you got into counseling, it was because of a school counselor. It was because of a community counselor you saw. It's because you are focused on the social emotional aspect. Rarely is someone ever thinking career. And why am I telling you that? Because I think of this. Rarely with groups are we thinking of who to pick and getting organized with it and getting started. We're usually thinking of, okay, who's the population and what type of group is it? And so my aim is that you take a second, you take a step back, and just each time you're going to run a group, whether it's a group like we're running in class, or whether it's in your internship, or whether it's in the quote unquote real jobs, real world, you give preparation and selection its dues, and you treat it as importantly as it is, because it really can set the tone for not just how your group's going to run, but what your clients or students are going to get out of it, right? There's their expression that's like, you can only make a first impression once. Well, you can only prepare for a group once at the start, before it happens. And you can only have that first meeting and that pre-group stuff once. So, yeah, hopefully this shed some light. And again, I think these are two really good chapters. I feel like they're easy reads. So I would say if you can kind of dive into it, or at least maybe skim through it. But as I said, we get it. You've been very patient with the term. Thank you. If this is just what you use for chapter 8 and 9, we get it. Should be good. So have a lovely rest of your week and weekend, and I will see you all on Tuesday. Bye.